Tonight, Democrats are not giving up. Two key committees scheduling hearings to get some answers about the Mueller report. They're also continuing to go after the president and the attorney general. We'll show you their latest offensive. Then we'll look at whether Republicans are starting to finally push back against President Trump. It may be just a ripple now, but could it turn into a wave? Also, our special report on criminal justice reform and how one state in our region is getting excellent results after revamping its parole system. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. The battle over the Mueller report continues. Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff are not giving up. They are Democratic chairs of the Judiciary and Intelligence Committees, respectively. Judiciary is going to start holding hearings next week on the findings that Bob Mueller laid out. The first one will feature John Dean, Nixon's White House counsel, who gave bombshell testimony during Watergate. Schiff's Intelligence Committee, they're going to focus on part one of the Mueller report. That's the part that deals with Russian interference in our election. Schiff also had some strong words for Attorney General William Barr.
We find ourselves, I think, for the first time with an attorney general who really is the president's defense lawyer and spokesperson, and who's quite good at it, and has the veneer of respectability to camouflage what he's doing. And I think he's the second most dangerous man in the country.
That brings us to Hope Hicks. Hicks was the Trump campaign spokeswoman who later became White House communications director. She's been subpoenaed to testify before the House Judiciary Committee, but the White House instructed Hicks not to cooperate. But Reuters is now reporting that Hicks has agreed to hand over documents related to the campaign, just not turning over anything from her time in the White House. Also, more than 1,000 former federal prosecutors have signed a letter saying Trump obstructed justice, and they released a video to make their point. That video is fronted by Robert De Niro.
Recently, over 1,000 former federal prosecutors who served under both Republican and Democratic presidents have united to sign a statement to help Americans understand what's actually in the Mueller report. Their conclusion should trouble us all.
We carefully read and analyzed the Mueller report.
And we all strongly believe that there is more than enough evidence to indict President Trump for multiple felony counts of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice. Of obstruction of justice.
And joining us now is one of the stars of the video you were just watching and a good friend of the program, former federal prosecutor Roland Riopelle. Hi, Roland.
Andrew, I want to note for the audience that I was the only guy who appeared in shirt sleeves because I wore like a really nice bird dot coat, which was terrible for the camera, so they made me take it off. Well, it was a little embarrassing. You'd think I'd learned better from having been on RNN so many times.
I got to start with a De Niro question. What's next for you and Bobby? You going to Cannes or are you going to Tribeca? You're going to take the Grodin role in a remake of Midnight Run?
Andrew, as our people say, from your lips to God's ears, it should be so.
All right, let's roll up those shirt sleeves if we can and get into it. First of all, what led you to participate in that video, and did you get the outcome you were hoping for from your participation?
What led me to it is, I am friendly with a number of the other commentators who appeared on that video, including, Mimi Rocah, who, I communicate with on social media and by email occasionally. And Mimi, who is, of course, a much more prominent commentator than I, emailed me and asked me if I would be interested in participating in making the video. And I said that I certainly was, because I do feel that it's the duty of everyone like me to speak out anytime we see a problem. And of course, right now we see quite a few of them in the legal world. So I was happy to do it. I think it had a very positive impact on sort of bringing along more former colleagues to sign the letter that I signed early on, indicating that in our view a crime had been committed, and it was important for the public to know that. And I just think that the Mueller report is so long and so dense, and it does require a certain expertise to read it meaningfully, that the more of that kind of thing, like that video, that can get out the more we can educate the public. And indeed, that's sort of where the congressional hearings, I think, are going.
Yeah,
so
and
I thought it was important to do.
It certainly was, and just like with Mueller himself, it's one thing to have the written word, it's another thing to hear from the people themselves. Want to shift on to Hope Hicks, who we reported was subpoenaed, told by the White House to refuse to cooperate, still turned over some documents. Now, we've seen the refusing to testify coming from this White House before. Anything different in your mind from Hope Hicks on this?
Well, it's hard to tell right now. With respect to the documents that she has turned over, I think they relate to the Trump campaign, and I think she may have turned over some or all of these documents previously to congressional committees. But as a technical legal matter, the documentation that she generated during the Trump campaign could not be covered by executive privilege because Trump was not the executive at that point. So I don't think Ms. Hicks had much of an option in terms of those documents. I think she has been directed not to turn over any documents from her days in the White House, and she probably will follow that directive. It's unclear to me whether she'll testify about anything that went on in the White House. Again, with respect to what went on in the campaign, I don't think she has any choice, so she'll be compelled to testify as to that. I can't tell whether she's really breaking ranks with the rest of the Trump team by doing as she's doing or not, but I think we'll have a better sense of that when we see her testify. We'll have a sense whether she is still all in for Donald Trump or not.
If she winds up fighting the subpoena, like so many others in the Trump administration, that thing's going to wind up in court. Now, we've seen some cases over financial records, for example, that were fast-tracked, and in both cases they ruled against the administration. Speed in the courts here works for the Democrats, and the delays help the White House. Roland, how is speed decided in something like this? Is it case by case, or is there any way to get all of these constitutional battles to be fast-tracked in court?
It is a case-by-case thing, Andrew, but a case of a congressional subpoena relating to the presidency and, potentially impeachment is almost certainly going to be fast-tracked in every instance because it's important that Congress work through these issues, if at all possible, well in advance of the election, so that we don't have impeachment hearings in, say, August of 2020 on the eve of the election, right after the Republican convention. So I think there is a sense of urgency. I think things will move very quickly for that reason.
Let's get to those committee hearings that we were talking about. We get Schiff and House Intel focusing on conspiracy and collusion. That's part one of the Mueller report. Nadler and Judiciary on obstruction. That's part two. These hearings are not going to have Mueller, it doesn't look like. No witnesses from the White House. Is this the right approach to go on with these hearings? What might they uncover, and will they have the same impact without those witnesses?
To the extent witnesses decline to appear and refuse even when subpoenaed, I think all Congress can do is hold them in contempt and get whatever remedies it can at that point. But calling any witnesses to highlight the important aspects of the Mueller report will be important because we're now at the stage of the game where Congress is trying to educate the Republic, trying to alleviate the sort of endless stream, like a never-ending fire hose of falsehoods and misdirection coming from the White House and to some degree the Department of Justice. Congress is now exercising its authority to try to get to the facts to the extent it can, and to the extent the White House continues to hide the facts every way it can, that too will educate the public that there's something here. There's fire as well as smoke. And the more the public becomes educated, the more likely that Congress can ultimately return articles of impeachment against Mr. Trump. And I will also say that with respect to Mr. Schiff's committee, holding hearings on what went on with the Russian interference is enormously important because that committee should be recommending to Congress as a whole statutes it should pass to protect us when the 2020 election rolls around. And the way to do that is to have an inquiry into what happened and what will work to protect us. So Chairman Schiff is doing exactly what he should be doing, in my opinion, at this point in time.
Running out of time, but I really want to get in one Mueller question for you, which is that as special counsel, he was a Justice Department employee and bound by the OLC guideline that said can't indict a sitting president. We went through all the rigmarole after that. But I note that in the Nixon and Clinton investigations, you had special prosecutors who were outside the Justice Department who did come back with pretty damning conclusions about both presidents. So are we doing this the wrong way? Going forward, should we go back to special prosecutors as opposed to special counsels?
You know, I think there's an argument to be made that the old system was the better system. It got to the truth quicker and with greater emphasis, so the public, there was less chance for the public to be misled. However, you know, the position of special prosecutor had to be passed and reenacted by Congress, and I just don't think they could do it. I don't think they had the votes when the special counsel statute was passed and the regulations were written. So without those votes, this is what we got, Andrew, and now it's up to Congress, as I think Mr. Mueller made pretty clear, to do its duty, hold hearings, educate the public, and then take whatever action it believes is warranted. So I do think that Congress is functioning the way that it should. I think Mueller may have been hamstrung a bit by the nature of his role as opposed to being a special prosecutor like Leon Jaworski. With that said, I think the facts are beginning to come out, and they will lead Congress where it needs to be led, and perhaps the American public as well, and we'll see it all play out.
Roland, I'm walking here, Riopelle, former federal prosecutor and Robert De Niro co-star. Roland, as always, thanks very much.
Pleasure to be with you, Andrew.
Up next on RFL, are Republicans finally standing up to President Trump? The GOP pushing back on a couple of issues. Is that the start of something new, or are we going to see the same old thing all over again?